Greetings, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland on Baker Street in London. Behind me you see this handsome but somewhat forgettable building, and that is the building that housed the Special Operations Executive in the Second World War, the SOE, which was a cloak and dagger organization about insinuating secret agents into occupied Europe during the Second World War to carry out sabotage and various attacks on the Third Reich. Perhaps the most notable operation that was planned there was the Telemark operation. So Norway had been invaded by Germany in April 1940, and Quisling, the leader of the Nationalsamling party, had quickly seized power in Oslo as the German forces came in. He actually didn't do it in coordination with them, but he welcomed them and quickly made a broadcast on the radio. So Quisling was an army officer, and then he was Minister of Defense. As part of a League of Nations delegation, he'd been to the Soviet Union in the 20s and 30s and seen the horrific suffering and heavy oppression of the Soviet people. Indeed, he wasn't anti-Russian, he married a Russian, but he thought that communism was the final horror, and anything must be done to resist communism, which was deliberately starving millions of people to death. So he saw fascism as the strongest anti-communist force, so he set up the Nationalsamling, National Union Party. Anyway, so Germany was occupying Norway, and a few of Quisling's National Union people, they supported them, but most Norwegians disliked him, and the Third Reich quickly got wind of that, and so they sidelined him, though he was nominally their man in Norway. So the Germans, well, even Nazi ideology wasn't anti-Norwegian. Most Norwegians could speak German, and they're fairly similar cultures. The king of Norway, Håkon VII, had fled to London, and he lived here on Palace Green, Kensington. A lot of the Norwegian Army, Air Force, Navy had fled, and the Norwegian merchant fleet. Norway had 20% of the world's merchant ships at the time, so that was an enormous boost to the Allies. Remember, of course, Norway had been a neutral country at the time. The Third Reich had only invaded it because Sweden's iron ore was taken out by train in the winter to Norway and shipped through the Norwegian Sea around to Germany, because the Gulf of Bothnia, that's the sea in between Sweden and Finland, was icebound in the winter, therefore it was impossible to remove it. So the Germans wanted to ensure year-round access to Swedish iron ore, which was crucial for the war economy. And equally the French and British wanted to prevent that happening. So in the 1930s, a number of scientists had been researching nuclear energy. Would it be possible to split the atom and release a most tremendous amount of energy, particularly splitting uranium atoms? So British scientists, German scientists, and so on, looking into this. And as the Nazi party in Germany grew more expansionist, scientists in this country were urged not to publish their findings, because, of course, in these scientific journals, these discoveries would be available to their confrères in das Dritten Reich. Anyway, the Germans in the Second World War were working on their own nuclear weapons project, as indeed was the United Kingdom. Australian and Canadian scientists also working to see whether they could make an atom bomb, and indeed so was the United States. And when the United States entered the war on the 7th of December 1941, the United Kingdom shared all its nuclear findings with the United States. So the US then began to finance the Manhattan Project. They quickly shut the other allies out of it, despite having gained from what they discovered. On the other hand, Australia, Canada, the UK, they couldn't fund such a project. Only the United States had deep enough pockets to do so. But the Allies certainly won the intelligence war. German intelligence was rather bungling and too susceptible to want to believability, asking their agents to confirm preconceived notions rather than objectively seeking evidence to establish the truth. But anyway, the Allies were aware of the German nuclear weapons project, and it involved something called heavy water from Norway. So some Norwegian resistance fighters were parachuted into Norway to try and disrupt this and have to blow up a ship carrying heavy water. I don't quite understand what heavy water is myself. You can see a Norwegian 60s film about it called The Heroes of Telemark. Telemark is the place in Norway where one of these crucial attacks took place. Tele has got nothing to do with television. And so they had various trading bases here in the UK, particularly in Scotland. It's that bit closer to Norway, and there's even more of a cultural affinity for Norway. For example, the Scots word bairn, that is Norwegian, meaning child. And you can see a Hollywood film from the 60s about it as well. So that is the SOE, which carried out these very audacious raids in mainland Europe during the Second World War.